There are two versions of my father: the man who threw away everything I loved, and the man who got down on his knees in front of the entire world to find me. I didn't know which one was real until my phone rang 50 times in one afternoon, and I had to decide: answer the call or let him disappear from my life the way he tried to make my dreams disappear from his. My name is Emily Grace Holloway, and for 23 years, I thought I knew the weight of things. I thought I knew the weight of a father's disappointment, the weight of a childhood home that felt less like a sanctuary and more like a storage unit for someone else's expectations. But I didn't know a thing. Not really. Not until the morning I came home and found my entire life sitting on the curb in black plastic garbage bags, slick with dew and smelling of last night's rain. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were the days I had a late shift at the brew house, the coffee shop where I'd been working since I dropped out of community college. I'd been saving up for a car, a real one, not the bicycle I'd been riding since I was 16. I was living in my father's house, a favor he reminded me of every single time I forgot to take out the recycling or left a mug in the sink. It was a favor with a sharp edge, a constant, low-grade hum of "you owe me" that vibrated through every wall. I pulled my bicycle up the cracked driveway, the chain clicking its usual complaint. The house, a two-story colonial with white siding that my father, Richard Holloway, kept meticulously clean, looked the same as always. But something felt off. It was the silence. Not the usual quiet of an empty house, but a held-breath kind of quiet. And then I saw it. At the end of the driveway, next to the large green garbage bin that was only supposed to be put out on Thursdays, were 5 black garbage bags. They were tied at the top, bulging and lumpy. I recognized the fabric of a floral pillowcase my grandmother had given me spilling out of a tear in one. My stomach turned to ice. I dropped my bike, the clatter echoing down the suburban street. I walked towards the bags, my legs feeling like they were wading through deep water. I pulled open the first bag. On top, crumpled and damp, was my favorite sweater. It was a soft, oversized cable knit, the color of heather gray. My mom had given it to me for my 18th birthday, 3 years before she left. Underneath it were my sketchbooks, all of them. The one from high school, with the worn-out spiral binding. The one with the charcoal drawings of the old oak tree in the backyard. The one I'd started just last month, filled with designs for a little bakery I dreamed of opening someday. I stood there, my hands trembling, pulling things out. My collection of vintage recipe cards I'd found at flea markets. The small wooden jewelry box my mom had left behind, empty now, the hinge broken. My winter boots. A box of photographs, pictures of me and my friends from high school, my mom holding me as a baby, a faded photo of my grandparents at their wedding. All of it. My entire life, reduced to refuse. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A cold, clear fury settled into my bones, so heavy it anchored me to the spot. I looked up at the house. Through the living room window, I could see the back of my father's head. He was sitting in his recliner, the one facing the television, which was on but muted. He was perfectly still. He knew I was out here. I walked up the front steps. I didn't knock. I used my key, the metal cold in my hand. The door swung open, and the smell of lemon furniture polish and his particular brand of quiet rage hit me. He didn't turn around. "Dad," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "Why are my things in the driveway?" He took a slow sip from the mug on the side table next to him. It was a mug that said "World's Best Dad" on it. My mom had bought it for him before I was born. He still used it. I always found that bitterly ironic. "They're not in the driveway," he said, his voice flat. "They're at the curb for collection." I took a step into the room. "I can see that. Why?" He finally turned his head. Richard Holloway was a tall man, still broad-shouldered from his years as a high school football coach before he moved into administration. His hair was iron gray, cut short. His eyes, the same shade of blue as mine, were cold. "I told you, Emily. I gave you a deadline. I gave you a chance." "A deadline for what?" I asked, my mind racing. "To find a better job, to pay you rent? I've been giving you $200 a month. It's not much, but it's what I can do right now." "It's not about the money," he said, and the way he said it made it clear that it was, in fact, entirely about the money, but also about control, about respect, about 1,000 things I'd never be able to give him. "It's about direction, purpose. You're 23 years old, doodling in notebooks and serving coffee. I told you you had until the end of the month to get your act together, enroll back in school, get a real job, or find somewhere else to live. The end of the month is Friday, I said, my voice rising. Today is Tuesday. He shrugged. A slow, deliberate shrug that spoke of a man who had made a decision and found peace in its finality. I decided to move the timeline up. You needed a wake-up call. You've been drifting for years, Emily, living in a fantasy world. I'm done enabling it. Enabling? I laughed, but it was a hollow, broken sound. You haven't enabled anything. You've just tolerated me. There's a difference. You threw out my mother's jewelry box. You threw out my grandmother's recipe cards. My sketchbooks, Dad, my sketchbooks. His jaw tightened. They were taking up space, cluttering the house, cluttering your mind. You need to focus on the real world, not that nonsense. Nonsense. He called the only things that had ever made me feel like myself nonsense. In that moment, something inside me that had been holding on, some last, desperate thread of hope that he would one day see me, really see me, snapped. I looked around the living room. It was a museum of his life. His trophies from college. His framed degrees. His golf clubs in the corner. Not a single drawing of mine had ever hung on these walls. Not a single photograph of me with friends. There was one photo of me, my high school graduation, on a side table. I was smiling in it, but I remembered that day. He had been angry because I'd gotten a B in calculus and because I'd announced I was taking a year off before college. That photograph was not a celebration. It was a reminder of a failure. You're right, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I need to focus on the real world. I walked out of the living room, into the kitchen, and grabbed the biggest trash bags I could find from under the sink. Then I went back outside. I didn't ask for his help. I didn't cry. I spent the next 2 hours sorting through those bags on the curb, salvaging what I could. My sketchbooks were damp but intact. The recipe cards were a little warped but legible. I found my birth certificate and social security cards stuffed at the bottom of a bag, as if they were as worthless as a used napkin. I packed everything into my bicycle's panniers and a backpack. I left the rest. The stained pillowcase, the broken jewelry box, the winter boots that had a small crack in the sole. I left them there, on the curb, for him to see, a monument to his own cruelty. I didn't know where I was going. My best friend, Lena, lived with her parents 20 minutes away, but I couldn't face their pity. I had a few $100s in my savings account. My bicycle. A backpack full of the only things that mattered to me. As I pedaled away from that house, I didn't look back. I told myself I would never look back. I told myself that the weight I was carrying on my back was the only weight I would ever carry again. I was wrong. The heaviest weight was just beginning to form, a dense, dark star of grief and rage that would take a month to collapse into something I never expected. I ended up at a motel on the edge of town, the kind with a flickering neon sign that read, Starlight Inn. The room was $50 a night, smelled of bleach and stale cigarettes, and had a bed with a thin, scratchy blanket. I spread my damp sketchbooks on the small, formica-topped table to dry. I ate a granola bar for dinner, and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, and finally, I let the tears come. I cried for my mother, who had left when I was 15, unable to withstand the silent pressure of my father's world any longer. She moved to Arizona, remarried, and sent me birthday cards with $20 bills and a generic, "Love, Mom." I didn't blame her. I understood now. I cried for the little girl who had drawn pictures for her father, only to have him critique the perspective and tell her to practice her math facts instead. And I cried for the girl I was now, at 23, with no car, no home, and a backpack full of dreams that he had literally tried to throw away. The next day, I found a room to rent. It was a converted attic in an old Victorian house, owned by a sweet, distracted woman named Mrs. Gable, who was hard of hearing and asked me to pay in cash. It was small, with slanted ceilings and a single window that looked out at a sprawling oak tree. It had no kitchen, just a hot plate and a mini fridge. It was perfect. It was mine. I got a second job, waiting tables at a diner called the Corner Cup that was open 24 hours. I worked the night shift, from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, serving coffee and eggs to truckers and insomniacs. Then I'd go to my shift at the brew house from 7 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. I slept for a few hours in the afternoon, got up, drew, and did it all over again. I was running on adrenaline and spite. Every time I felt my eyes close with exhaustion, I saw my father's face, heard his voice calling my sketchbooks nonsense, and I would push harder. I was saving for a car, yes, but a deeper, more desperate part of me was saving for something else. A ticket out, a new life, a place where I could be the person I drew in my sketchbooks. Confident, successful, the owner of a little bakery with a chalkboard menu and the smell of cinnamon in the air. I stopped answering calls from my father's number. He called a few times in the first week. I let them go to voicemail. I didn't listen to them. I knew what they would say. They would be lectures, more deadlines, a demand to come back and talk sense. I had nothing to say to him. He had said everything he needed to say with 5 black garbage bags. Lena helped me get a cheap, prepaid phone. I transferred my number to it, the one number I wanted to keep. I needed to be reachable for my jobs for Mrs. Gable, but I didn't tell my father my new address. I didn't tell anyone who might tell him. I disappeared into my new life, a ghost emerging from a pile of trash. A month passed. The exhaustion became a permanent hum in my bones, but so did a strange, fierce pride. I had done it. I had found a place, 2 jobs, a routine. My savings account was growing. I'd even started a small Instagram account for my drawings, posting pictures of my bakery designs and little sketches of the customers at the diner. It had a few hundred followers, nothing huge, but people were liking them. People I didn't know, and that felt like a miracle. It was a Saturday afternoon, my one day off from both jobs. I was in my attic room, sitting on the floor with my sketchbook open in my lap, a cup of tea growing cold beside me. I was working on a new design, a wedding cake with cascading sugar flowers, each petal a different shade of pale pink. The afternoon light slanted through the window, warming the old wood floor. My phone buzzed, then it buzzed again, and again. I picked it up, frowning. The screen was lit up with notifications. Incoming calls. The number was a local area code, but one I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. Another call, same number, then another. And another. Within 30 seconds, I had 12 missed calls from the same number. My heart started to pound, a heavy, rhythmic thud against my ribs. My first thought was a mistake, a glitch. Someone's phone was having a seizure. Then it stopped, for about 10 seconds. I stared at the screen, my sketchbook forgotten. The phone buzzed again. This time, the number was different. Another local number. I let it ring. Voicemail, buzz, another call, buzz, another. The phone was now a frantic, buzzing creature in my hand. Calls were coming in one after another, from numbers I didn't know, stacking up the missed call counter. 15, 22, 30, panic, cold and sharp, sliced through the calm of the afternoon. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked to the window as if I might see someone outside with a bank of phones, orchestrating this. The street below was quiet. A woman walked her dog. A car drove by, nothing unusual. My phone buzzed again. I answered it this time, my voice a tight whisper. "Hello? Is this Emily Holloway?" A man's voice. Professional, urgent. "Who is this?" "My name is Mark. I'm a producer with WNEP, Channel 16 News. I've been trying to reach you. We need a comment." I blinked. "A comment? About what?" There was a pause on his end. "About the video, the one your father posted. It's gone viral. We're running a segment on the 6 o'clock news. We wanted to give you a chance to respond." My mind went blank. "Video? What video? My father?" "Mr. Holloway posted a video this morning on social media," the producer said, his voice taking on a practiced, cautious tone. "It's gained a lot of attention. He's asking for your help. He's asking the public to help find you." The phone buzzed with another incoming call. I pulled it away from my ear, seeing the third call waiting. I ended the call with the producer. My hand was shaking. I opened the social media app on my phone, the one I used for my drawings. I didn't even need to search. It was the first thing on my feed. A video posted by a local news page. The thumbnail was my father's face, but a version of it I had never seen before. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, his jaw slack. He looked broken. I pressed play. The video was shot in my childhood living room. The lighting was dim, making the room look cavernous. My father was sitting in his recliner, but he wasn't sitting in it the way he usually did, with that posture of authority. He was hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. He was wearing a rumpled shirt, not his usual crisp button-down. He looked small. "My name is Richard Holloway," he began, his voice rough, like he'd been screaming or crying. "And I need to find my daughter. Her name is Emily Grace Holloway." He looked directly into the camera, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen directed at me. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't judgment. It was fear, raw, unadulterated fear. "A month ago," he continued, his voice cracking, "I did something unforgivable. I was angry. I was frustrated. I thought I was teaching her a lesson. I thought I was helping her. I threw her things out. I put her belongings on the curb like they were garbage. I was wrong. I was so wrong." He stopped, pressing a hand over his mouth. He was crying. I had never in my entire life seen my father cry, not at his own father's funeral, not when my mother left, not ever. "She left that day," he said, his voice muffled by his hand. "And she hasn't come back. She won't answer my calls. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's safe. I don't know if she's eaten. I don't know if she's sleeping in a warm place. And it's my fault. Every single bit of it is my fault." He leaned forward, his face filling the screen. The camera shook slightly, as if the person holding it, maybe my father himself with a shaky hand, was also emotional. "Emily," he said, speaking directly to me, his voice a desperate plea. "If you're watching this, please just let me know you're okay. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about school, about a job, about any of it. I just need to know you're alive. I need to know you're safe. I was wrong. I was so blind. Please come home or call me, or send me a sign. Anything, I'm begging you. I can't live with this." The video ended. My phone was buzzing again. I looked at the screen. The missed call count was now at 52. I sat down heavily on the floor, the phone slipping from my hand and landing on the sketchbook with a soft thud. The cascade of sugar flowers I had been drawing blurred in front of my eyes. My father, the man who had thrown my life onto the curb like trash, was now on the news, crying, begging the internet to find me. The man who had never shown me an ounce of unqualified love was now performing it for the world. But as I sat there, the buzzing of the phone a distant, frantic insect noise, a different feeling began to creep in, slowly overwhelming the shock and the confusion. It was a feeling I didn't want to feel. It was a crack in the cold, clear fury I had built around myself like a fortress. It was the image of his hands. In the video, when he'd pressed them over his face, I'd seen them. They were red, chapped. The hands of a man who had spent a month in his own kind of purgatory. And the way he'd said my name. Not with the sharp, clipped tone of a disappointed coach, but with the ragged, open wound of a father who had realized, too late, what he had done. My first instinct was rage. How dare he use the public to find me? How dare he cry on camera when he hadn't shed a tear when he was bagging up my grandmother's recipes? This was another form of control, another way to make it about him. He was playing the victim. But then my phone buzzed again. A text this time from Lena. It read, "Oh my God, Em, have you seen it? Your dad is on every news channel. People are sharing it everywhere. He looks so lost. Are you okay? Call me." Another text from a number I didn't know. "Saw your dad's video. You should call him. He looks heartbroken." Another, "Emily, this is Mrs. Patterson from next door. Please let your father know you're all right. He's been walking the neighborhood every night looking for you." Another, "If you're going to ignore your father like this, you're no better than he was. He's trying to make amends." The calls and texts became a flood. 50 calls had turned into 100, then 200. The phone was now a live wire in my hand, vibrating with the collective judgment and sympathy of a city, a state, a world that had seen my father's tears and decided I was the cruel one for staying silent. I turned the phone off. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat in my attic room, the afternoon light fading into the long shadows of evening. I was alone again, but this time, the solitude felt different. It felt like a cage. I had spent a month building a life on the foundation of my father's rejection. My pride, my work, my savings, my drawings, they were all born from that moment at the curb. It was a painful birth, but it was mine. And now, with a single video, he had reached across the void I had created and pulled the rug out from under me again. He had taken my narrative and rewritten it. I was no longer the girl who had been thrown out. I was the girl who had abandoned her grieving father. I stayed in my room for 3 days. I called in sick to both jobs. I didn't turn my phone on. I didn't eat much. I just sat and I thought. I thought about the man in the video and the man who had put my things on the curb. Were they the same person? Could they be? The man I knew would never have admitted he was wrong. The man I knew would have let me freeze on the street before he'd shed a tear over it. But I had also never defied him like this before. I had never simply disappeared. Was his fear real? Or was it just the fear of what people would say? The great Richard Holloway, the respected school administrator, had a daughter living in a gutter somewhere because of him. Was this video a calculated move to save his own reputation? Or was it the unscripted collapse of a man who had finally broken under the weight of his own rigidity? On the fourth day, I turned my phone back on. I didn't look at the voicemails or the texts. I had to see one thing. I opened the social media app again. The video was no longer just local. It had been picked up by national news outlets. It had millions of views. The comments were a war zone. Some people called me a cruel, ungrateful daughter. Others said my father was a manipulative narcissist using emotional blackmail. But the majority, the loudest voice, was the one that said the same thing. Just let him know you're okay. It's not that hard. And that was the trap, wasn't it? It wasn't that hard. I could call him. I could send a text. I could end this. But if I did, what then? Would he go back to being the man I knew? Would the video just become a tool he'd use against me? Look what I did for you. Look how I humiliated myself. You owe me now. That was the pattern. Everything was a transaction. Everything came with a debt. But the image of his hands kept coming back to me. Those red, chapped hands. On the fifth day, I went back to work. The night shift at the corner cup. It was familiar. It was anonymous, or so I thought. I was pouring coffee for a trucker when I felt eyes on me. A woman in a booth, her face half hidden by a menu, was staring at me. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, then looked back, her phone in her hand. She was taking a picture of me. A cold dread washed over me. I finished my shift in a daze, every whisper, every glance feeling like a spotlight. When I walked out the back door at 6 a.m, a man with a camera was waiting by the dumpster. "Emily Holloway," he said, a microphone already pointed at my face. "Can you tell us why you've been ignoring your father? Have you seen the video? What's your response?" I ran. I got on my bicycle, and I pedaled so fast I thought my lungs would burst. I didn't go back to Mrs. Gable's. I went to Lena's house, pounding on her door until she opened it in her bathrobe, her eyes wide with sleep and then with understanding. She said, pulling me inside. "I've been so worried. Come in, come in." I collapsed on her couch, shaking. "He found me, Lena. They found me. A reporter was at my work." Lena sat beside me, her hand on my back. "It's everywhere, Em. You can't hide from it. People are talking." "What are they saying?" I asked, though I was afraid to know. Lena hesitated. "They're saying he's been walking the streets every night, putting up flyers with your picture. He went to the police, but since you're an adult, they said they couldn't do anything. He's lost his job, Em. The school board put him on leave. They said the publicity was disruptive." This was a detail that hit me like a physical blow. My father's job was his identity. It was the altar at which he worshipped. For him to have lost it, even temporarily, was unthinkable. It was the one thing he valued more than control. "He lost his job?" I whispered. Lena nodded. "That video, it went so big. People started digging into his history at the school. Some former students came forward, talked about how he was a hard-ass, how he was overly strict. It became this whole thing about toxic parenting and the school's culture. The school had to distance themselves." I sat up. This was spiraling in a way I had never anticipated. I hadn't just disappeared. I had set off a chain reaction that had detonated my father's entire life. The video, which I had seen as a manipulation, had actually been an act of self-immolation. He had burned his own world down to find me. "He really has been walking the streets?" I asked, my voice small. "Every night, according to the posts," Lena said. "People see him. They post about it. He looks not good, Em. He looks like he's not sleeping, not eating. There's a whole group of people who are organizing search parties. They're calling it Find Emily." I put my head in my hands. I just wanted to be left alone. I just wanted to build my own life. I wasn't trying to. I didn't want any of this. "I know," Lena said, "but you have to make a decision, because it's not going away. It's only getting bigger. Every day you stay silent, more people are going to see you as the villain. And I'm not saying that's right. It's not. What he did to you was awful. But you can't let this thing consume you. You have to take control of it." She was right. Hiding was no longer an option. I had two choices. I could continue to run, change my name, move to another city, live in the shadows, always looking over my shoulder. Or I could face it. I could face him. The thought of seeing my father again made me want to be sick. But the thought of living the rest of my life as a fugitive, my story told by strangers on the internet, was worse. I asked Lena if I could stay with her for a few more days. She said yes, without hesitation. That night, I sat on her couch and I turned my phone on. I scrolled through the voicemails. There were hundreds. I ignored them all until I got to one from a number I knew by heart. My father's. The voicemail was from 3 days ago. I pressed play. There was a long stretch of silence. I could hear him breathing. Then, in a voice that was so quiet I had to press the phone hard against my ear, he spoke. "Emily, it's Dad." Another pause. "I don't know if you'll ever listen to this. I don't know if I deserve for you to listen to it. I've been thinking a lot. About that day. About everything. I found something. In one of the bags, the ones you left. I didn't mean to keep them, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. The garbage truck came, and I stopped them. I pulled the bags back. I've been going through them." His voice cracked. "I found a drawing. It was wet, almost ruined. It was a picture of a little house. A bakery, I think. It had a sign over the door. It said Emily's. And there was a woman behind the counter. She was smiling. And there was a little girl sitting at a table, drawing. And I realized the woman was you, and the little girl was me. It was me when I was little. You drew me sitting in your bakery. You drew me happy." He let out a sob, a raw, ugly sound. "I didn't know. I never knew. I never looked. I was so busy looking at what I thought you should be, I never saw who you were. And I threw it away. I threw you away. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Emily. I'm not asking you to come home. I need you to know that I see it now. I see you. And I am so, so sorry." The voicemail ended. I sat in the dark of Lena's living room, the phone clutched in my hand, and for the first time since I'd seen those garbage bags on the curb, I cried. I cried not for the girl I had been, but for the man my father had become. I cried for the little girl in my drawing, the one who looked just like me, sitting happily in a bakery that didn't exist yet. I cried for the father who had pulled garbage bags back from the truck, who had spent a month sifting through the remnants of his own cruelty to find a single drawing of his daughter's dream. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to text him. I was going to go to him. I was going to walk into that house, the house I had sworn I would never return to, and I was going to look him in the eye. I didn't know if I was going to forgive him. I didn't know if I was going to scream at him. But I was going to stop running. I borrowed Lena's car. As I drove through the familiar streets, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. The neighborhood looked the same, but everything felt different. I felt like I was driving into a storm. I turned onto Maple Street, and I saw it. My childhood home, but it was surrounded. There were news vans parked along the curb, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky. There were people, small clusters of them, standing on the sidewalk, holding phones. And there, on the front lawn, was my father. He was on his knees. He was wearing the same rumpled shirt from the video. His hair was unkempt, longer than I'd ever seen it. He was holding a piece of paper in his hands, looking down at it. And he was alone. The reporters were keeping their distance, for the moment, giving him a strange, wide berth. I pulled the car to the curb a few houses down. I got out. My legs felt like they were made of lead. A reporter spotted me and started to move forward, but someone held them back. A murmur went through the crowd. People were pointing. Phones were raised. I didn't look at them. I only looked at my father. He hadn't seen me yet. He was still on his knees, staring at the paper. I walked across the lawn. The grass was damp with morning dew, soaking through my sneakers. I stopped a few feet in front of him. "Dad," I said. He looked up. His face was gaunt, hollowed out. There were deep shadows under his eyes. And in that moment, I saw the full weight of what he had done to himself. This was not a performance. This was a man who had been living in his own personal hell. He looked at me, and for a long moment, he didn't seem to recognize me. Then his eyes widened. The piece of paper slipped from his fingers. It was my drawing, the one of the bakery. He had it. He had saved it. He had been holding it. "Emily," he breathed. His voice was so hoarse it was almost inaudible. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He stumbled, and I instinctively reached out, grabbing his arm. He was thinner than I remembered, his arm feeling almost frail under my hand. He steadied himself, his hand gripping my arm in return. He was trembling. We stood there, in the middle of the front lawn, surrounded by cameras and strangers, holding onto each other. "I'm here," I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "I'm okay." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just pulled me into his arms, a desperate, crushing embrace. He was crying, his shoulders shaking, his face buried in my hair. And for the first time in my life, I held my father. I held him while he fell apart. I don't know how long we stood there. The world faded away. The cameras, the whispers, the past, all of it dissolved. There was only this: a father who had made a terrible mistake and a daughter who had survived it. When he finally pulled back, he looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. He picked up the drawing from the grass, brushing a speck of dirt from it with a reverence that broke my heart. "I see it," he said, his voice a raw whisper. "I see you, Emily. I see your bakery. I see your dreams. I was a fool. I was so busy trying to build you into something I understood, I couldn't see the beautiful thing you were already becoming." He held the drawing out to me. "I kept it safe. I know I ruined the others. I know I threw away things that mattered, but I kept this one. I found it, and I held on to it. It's all I had left of you." I took the drawing. The paper was wrinkled, the ink smudged in one corner from the rain, but it was my drawing. It was my dream, captured on paper, and he had saved it. "I didn't come here to fix everything," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't know if we can fix everything. What you did, it broke something in me, Dad. Something I'm still trying to rebuild." "I know," he said, nodding slowly. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. But I want to try, Emily. I want to spend whatever time I have left trying to be the father you deserved. I want to help you build that bakery, if you'll let me." I looked at the house behind him. The white siding was still pristine. The lawn was still meticulously mowed. But the man standing in front of it was not the same man who had thrown my things on the curb. He was a man who had been broken open, who had lost everything he thought defined him, and had found something else in the wreckage. I looked at the drawing in my hand, at the little girl sitting at the table, drawing. I had drawn that girl happy. I had drawn her in my bakery, in my future. And in that drawing, my father was there too. The little girl was him. I had placed him in my dream world, in a place of warmth and safety and sugar flowers, without even realizing it. Maybe that was the truth I had been running from. Not that I hated him, but that I had always, on some deep, fundamental level, wanted him there. I wanted him to see me, and now, finally, he did. "I'm not moving back in," I said, the first boundary I was setting. He flinched but nodded. "I understand. But I'll let you help me look for a commercial space for the bakery. I have a little saved. And maybe we can have dinner, once a week, somewhere neutral." A light flickered in his eyes. It wasn't the cold, calculating light of the man I had known. It was something softer, something hopeful. I'd like that more than anything." I looked around at the crowd that had gathered, at the cameras that were still pointed at us. I had become a character in a story I never asked to be in, but I realized, standing there, that I had the power to write the next chapter. I turned back to my father. "Let's go inside," I said, "and we can figure out what to do about all of this." I gestured vaguely at the news vans, the people, the circus that had become our lives. He put a hand on my shoulder, a tentative, almost shy touch. "I'll handle it," he said. "I'll go out there and tell them to leave. I'll tell them the story is over, that you're safe. That's all that matters." I nodded. I believed him. For the first time, I believed him. We walked towards the house together. He opened the door for me, and I stepped inside. The smell of lemon polish was gone. The house was dusty, a little cluttered, with newspapers piled on the coffee table and dishes in the sink. It was the mess of a man who had been too lost to care. It felt more like a home than it ever had. I walked into the living room. The recliner was still there. But on the wall above it, in a simple frame, was another drawing. It was one I had done when I was 12. It was a picture of a big, clumsy-looking dog with lopsided ears and a goofy smile. I had given it to him for Father's Day, and he had said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" and put it in a drawer. I had forgotten about it. But here it was, framed, hanging on the wall. I turned to look at him. He was standing in the doorway, watching me, his expression a mixture of hope and shame. "I found it," he said simply. "I've been putting them up, the ones I could salvage. The ones that weren't ruined. I wanted them where I could see them. I wanted to remember." I walked over to the wall. There were 3 drawings in total. The dog, a pencil sketch of the old oak tree in the backyard, and a watercolor of a cupcake with rainbow sprinkles done in the shaky hand of a 10-year-old. They were all my drawings. He had saved them all those years, hidden away. And now they were on display in the most prominent place in the house. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there looking at my childhood drawings, seeing them through his eyes for the first time. They weren't nonsense. They were proof. Proof that I had always been an artist. Proof that he had always known on some level, even if he had refused to admit it. He walked up beside me, his presence a quiet, solid weight. "I was scared," he said, his voice low. "When your mother left, I was terrified of losing you too. I thought if I pushed you hard enough, if I made you tough enough, you'd be safe. You'd be successful. You'd never have to depend on anyone. I thought I was protecting you. But I was just pushing you away." "You succeeded," I said, my voice flat. "You pushed me so far away I thought I'd never come back." He closed his eyes, a pained expression crossing his face. "I know. And I will never forgive myself for that. But I'm asking for a chance, Emily, one chance, to be different." I looked at the drawings on the wall, then at the man beside me. The man who had pulled garbage bags back from the truck. The man who had walked the streets for a month, looking for me. The man who had framed a 12-year-old's drawing of a dog and hung it in his living room. "One chance," I said quietly. "But you have to understand, Dad. I'm not the girl you threw out. I can't be her again. I'm the woman who built a life out of a backpack and a bicycle. I'm the woman who is going to open a bakery. And if you want to be in my life, you have to be in that woman's life. Not the idea of me you had in your head." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I want to know her. I want to know the woman who can draw like this." He gestured to the wall. "The woman who can survive what I did to her and still come back. She sounds like someone I'd be very proud to know." And in that moment, something in my chest, something that had been locked tight for a month, for years, for a lifetime, began to loosen. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was the first crack of light in a door I thought I had bolted shut forever. The phone in my pocket buzzed, and buzzed again. I pulled it out, ready to turn it off. But my father gently put his hand over mine. "Let me," he said. He took the phone from my hand. He walked to the front door and opened it. The cameras and the crowd were still there, waiting. He stepped out onto the porch, and I watched from the window. He held up my phone, the screen facing the crowd. "This is my daughter's phone," he said, his voice loud and clear. "It has been ringing nonstop for days. You have made your point. You have helped. You have shared. And now you need to stop." He set the phone down on the porch railing. "My daughter is safe. She is home. The story you wanted is over. What happens now is between a father and his daughter. And it's none of your business." He picked up the phone, turned it off, and put it in his pocket. Then he walked back inside and closed the door, shutting out the noise, the judgment, the world. He looked at me, and for the first time in a month in maybe 23 years, he smiled. It was a small, tentative, uncertain smile, but it was real. "I've got a lot to learn," he said. I nodded, a smile of my own, just as small and tentative, tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Me too." We stood in the quiet of the living room, the afternoon light now streaming through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was no longer a museum or a storage unit. It was a place where 2 people, broken and healing, stood in the rubble of what was and began to consider what could be. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. A fragile, terrifying, hopeful beginning. I didn't know if my father and I would ever have the kind of relationship I'd dreamed of as a little girl. I didn't know if the scars of that day on the curb would ever fully fade. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the girl whose things were on the curb. I was Emily Grace Holloway, the woman who had walked back into her father's house, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as an equal, ready to build a future on her own terms. And somewhere, in the depths of my backpack, in a sketchbook with slightly warped pages, a little bakery with a chalkboard menu, and the smell of cinnamon in the air was waiting to become real. And maybe, just maybe, there was a place for a father with red, chapped hands to sit at one of the tables, next to a little girl who was drawing, and finally be happy.